Welcome to another edition of the Voice of Palestine, Voice of the Palestinian People. It's October 21st, 2013, and I'm your co-host, Hanna Khawas. This week we'll be talking with Khaled Barakat, a Palestinian activist, journalist, and writer based here in Vancouver. Khaled will talk with us about the Global Week of Action to free Ahmad Saadat and the situation of Palestinian political prisoners in general. Good evening, Khaled, and welcome to the Voice of Palestine.
Good evening, Hanna, and thank you for having me.
You know, could we talk a bit about the situation of Palestinian prisoners in general? And, the statistics are overwhelming. Since 67, over 750,000 Palestinians been through Israeli jails. So could you tell us a bit about it and why Israel is holding the Palestinian people hostage, basically, and in a big jail?
Yes. Well, as you know, Hanna, the Palestinian prisoner movement, or what we know as the Palestinian prisoner movement, have actually existed since the very first day of the struggle of the Palestinian people. So the history of prisoners and the struggle in prisons is the history of the Palestinian struggle in general, and we cannot separate the two from each other. And as you also recall, the very famous popular songs in 1936 and 39, in the Great Revolution of Palestine about prisoners. So we're talking about a very long and rich struggle that have accumulated in the last 100 years. So today, the Palestinian prisoners are fighting for freedom, as they did always, because the Palestinian prisoners, who are currently now about 5,200 prisoners, they are the core of the Palestinian National Liberation Movement in Palestine. And that's why they are in prison. They are in prison because Israel don't want these student activists and labor movement activists and women activists to be mobilizing our people in the streets and in the camps and villages and in the cities. So what they do to them is they arrest them and they isolate them. And that's another struggle that Palestinians are engaged in behind bars. And it's usually a history that it's written by the Palestinian prisoners themselves. Mm-hmm. They are different than any other sector in terms of their role in the national liberation movements. Palestinians have turned these prisons into schools and universities for even young Palestinians who get to be also arrested by the Israelis to come out from these prisons more confident of their national liberation movement, and they're not criminals, they're not thieves, they're not breaking the law. They are a part and the leaders of the national liberation movement. And Israel, because of these reasons, Israel have waged in the last 3 years particularly, stripping them from rights that they have gained through hunger strikes, like the right to education, limiting their visitation. Sometimes a family cannot visit their son or daughter for months. There are a number of Palestinians who were in isolation, and now Israel in the last week has been trying to use different exits, different kind of laws to isolate the leaders of the Palestinian prisoner movement again under, different pretexts and different justifications. And so also the administration detentions, which is a law that has existed since the British colonization of Palestine. They can actually arrest a Palestinian, have him or her in jail for 6 months, renewable, without any charges, without being taken to a court without having the right to have a lawyer. So Palestinian prisoners don't have rights under occupation. And the only rights that they actually have now is rights that they have gained through struggle and not because of a favor by the occupation.
Yeah, they won some rights in the recent hunger strikes, and also there were exchange of prisoners. But I heard most or many of these prisoners that were released with the exchange with the Gilad Shalit, who was recently in Vancouver. Many of these prisoners were arrested.
Yes. Yes, and some of those prisoners have got engaged in hunger strikes, like Samir al-Isawi, for example, who went into hunger strikes for over 200 days, and number of Palestinian prisoners who were deported from the West Bank to Gaza in the so-called Shalit deal. One of them was assassinated, and some of them are being even harassed by the Israeli security agencies, sending them messages into their cell phones, imagine, telling them you will never come back to the West Bank and you will never, So Palestinian prisoners, particularly now, Hannah, is they are being targeted because of the also conditions outside the prisons itself, and that is the political conditions of the Palestinian movement and the conditions in the region.
Yeah, and it's worth noting also that during the Oslo Accord, Israel promised to release all Palestinian prisoners before 93, but this didn't happen. Thousands of them are still in Israeli jails.
Yes, and now they are also trying to use them as a card to pressure the Palestinian Authority for more concessions. And so, whenever they want to use this card, they'll use it in order to benefit their position in the negotiations. And unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority is buying into this.
Yeah, although they didn't achieve any release really or any concessions to the Palestinian prisoners, like we said before, they achieved their demands, like especially the solitary confinement.
Yes.
By hunger striking and by their struggle themselves, rather than by the so-called Palestinian Authority, who's really a tool for the occupation. Really, I don't think they are sincere even in
absolutely
in achieving any national rights for the Palestinians. But that's our destiny, and it's upon us to change this rotten leadership and collaborator leadership. Many from all groups are many leaders, especially the ones who are sincere and compatriot, are in Israeli jails, including leaders from Fatah, like Marwan Barouthi. So it's clear that the Israelis assassinate or put in jail those who really want or demand justice and demand the rights of the Palestinian people, historic rights and national rights and human rights. So they don't like those. So the ones who have the VIP passes are those ones who are collaborators, not or else they'll be in jail. Yes.
And you do hear that in the streets daily. Palestinians are saying our leaders are either under the ground, killed by the Israelis, or behind bars. And so they do feel the absence of these genuine voices that you mentioned, such as Marwan Barghouti, and others. But the most important thing I think is to remember is that Israel have never released any prisoners without pressure, and Israel have never released, particularly when we talk about the exchange operations. I mean, if we go back to the 1970-71, the first, exchange of prisoners, and then the major ones like the one of Ansar in 83, and then Nauras operation 85, and the Wafa al-Ahrar, or the promise of the free and the Khalid deal. Israel always released prisoners when they wanted something from the Palestinian resistance, and that is Israeli captured soldiers.
They don't release them from their goodwill or their good intentions. It's clear that, and
and the reason they do that, Hanna, also, it has a very significant depth to it, from even a Zionist point of view, is that it's not because they think one Israeli worth 1,000 or 2,000 Palestinians. It's because they want to send a message to the Israeli settlers, to the Israeli soldiers, that we care about you, because they don't want these settlers and these soldiers to start evacuating and leaving Palestine. They want them there, and so they're willing to pay the price, and not because of, Israel cares about Jews. Israel doesn't care about Jews.
No, clearly they care for their project, the Zionist project. They never did historically either. When the slaughter was going on in Europe, they supported quotas in North America. So it's clear, and there is a statement in 1938 by Ben Gurion, who said, if I have a choice to rescue the children in Germany, the Jewish children in Germany, and send them to Britain, rescue all the Jewish children in Germany, send them to Britain, or rescue half of them and send them to Palestine, I'll choose the second. He was willing to sacrifice with half of the Jewish children in Germany for his Zionist project. So this is not, it's true what you're saying. This is not new to the Zionist mentality.
Yes, Ben Gurion was a very committed Zionist to his racist settler project.
So, there is this week that's been going on, actually, this week to free Ahmad Saadat. Could you tell us a bit about it, about the week of action, the global week of action, and what's happening, what's taking place?
Yes, this Global Week of Action is in solidarity with Palestinian political prisoners and Ahmad Saadat, who is the General Secretary of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And he was arrested by the Palestinian Authority in mid-January 2002, and then placed in Jericho prison. Him and his four other of his comrades under a U.S. and Britain supervision, and this was a deal that was constructed by the U.S., the PA, Israel, and the British, and even Canada later got involved. And it is interesting to notice that the same jailers who were in Jericho are the same British jailers who were supervising, prisons with, in Northern Ireland, political prisoners and prosecuting, fighters there, and also involved in crimes against, political prisoners inside their own countries. So and then in March 14th, the Israeli army actually went inside Jericho with tanks and military vehicles and over 200 soldiers, and they surrounded the prison, and they demolished almost two-thirds of the prison.
What year was that, Khaled? You said March 14th?
2006.
So that's clearly after the assassination of Arafat by Poland.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Because I think it didn't happen when he was alive. Only it happened when this Abbas was took over. So
in fact, you know, like the information that we received then, even that you know, they did it while Mahmoud Abbas was outside of Palestine in order for him not to bear any responsibility, but he actually knew that the Israelis are going to do that, and he didn't care. You know, Mahmoud Abbas and the PA, they don't care about Palestinian prisoners, whether they are, you know, I mean, practically Ahmad Saadat is supposed to be the second man in the PLO ranks, you know, and, you know, they don't care about him or about, you know, just a poor Palestinian, you know, shepherd who gets arrested. For them, it's irrelevant as long as they maintain their own, you know, interest. But just to give people a little bit of background, and the reason he was in jail is because, you know, Israel have assassinated the General Secretary of the PFLP, Abu Ali Mustafa, on August 27th of 2001, and the front have retaliated by assassinating a racist minister, Rahbam Zaevi, who was then the tourism minister, and that's why the story of the Ahmad Saadat and his comrades are still continuing until today, is because Israel wanted them in jail, and they actually couldn't prosecute him on any valid evidence. The only reason they used in their statement when they sentenced him 30 years, you know, to jail, is that he is the General Secretary of the PFLP. But like no relation or evidence to the assassination of Rahbam Zaevi. But oftenly you see in the Israeli press, he's usually portrayed as the guy who got prosecuted because of the assassination of Zaevi. Without any kind of even proof. But the important thing is that Ahmad Saadat, along with Marwan Barghouthi and many other Palestinian leaders inside prisons and jails, have also continued struggle on a different front by unifying the Palestinian prisoners, by leading hunger strikes and providing an example of how a leader should be in the front lines, along with his brothers and comrades, and they have did that. So Israel isolated them, and Ahmad Saadat was in isolation for over 1,000 days, and basically, what does that mean is that he would be in a cell for 23 hours a day. They will let him out for 1 hour while chained, and they call this fora. It's a 1 hour break, and he is not supposed to even buy anything if he wants to buy. He's forbidden from books. He's forbidden from visitation, and this is the new Israeli torture tools that they use, is that they don't hit a prisoner like Ahmad Saadat with a baton or, physical, torture, but just isolation, and that psychological torture tool of isolating someone from everyone. It's just torture in a different level, and they're using that, and they're getting away with that, and that's why the entire prisoner movement in last September declared a hunger strike, and they have won. They break that, that law, and Israel had to end their isolation.
Yeah, and you said, if I heard you correctly, you said 1,000 days. That's almost 3 years, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Almost 3
but
years.
Other Palestinian prisoners have have actually been in isolation for more than 8 years.
Oh yeah. No, that shows the ugly face of these fascists in Israel. So it's really telling, that the Israelis didn't dare to do many things when Arafat, and that's why they eventually assassinated him, Sharon assassinating him after getting green light from Bush.
Yes. Yes.
And while Arafat was there, there wasn't really, Israel didn't dare to do whatever they like they are doing now. And the settlements especially is continuing at rapidly and large speed, and these people is just only complaining, and they're not saying enough is enough. The Oslo Accord is null and void, and they still abiding by it, while Israel violated it from day one. From Gaza, the airport in Gaza that they bombed, which they allowed in the Oslo process, to the 20 miles fishing zone in Gaza. Now it's 3, and they extended it lately to 5 or 6 after Morsi negotiated the ceasefire. It's clearly they're doing what they want, and this guy and his cronies sitting in Ramallah are doing nothing. Actually, they covering. They are used as a cover for Israeli expansion. What do you think?
I think that, the dangerous part of it is the so-called security cooperation. Mm-hmm. And they justify that by saying, well, we have agreements, and usually what security cooperation means is that they either jointly carry operations against Palestinian resistance or separately. And the PA would rather do it separately because they don't want to look like, in front of the masses that they are collaborators. But who do they prosecute? They prosecute student leaders, labor leaders, resistance movement leaders, and lately they have been, even carrying operations against refugee camps. So you are absolutely right, Hanna. The PA as it exists now, it's not the same PA policies that existed, in Arafat mind, maybe, particularly in the, before 2000. And I do agree with you that they folded that era with Arafat when the Palestinian security were actually the leaders of the security agencies during Arafat are now in jails, in Israeli jails. And the people who are running the show now in the Palestinian security, agencies are what Palestinians back home call them the Dayton boys, referring to General Keith Dayton, because they were constructed on the basis of that you do security and that's all you do. And Israel is not your enemy, and the enemy is terrorism, and terrorism means Hamas and PFLP and Islamic Jihad. So legalizing the war against resistance by using some of their Palestinian tools. But just to go back on the prisoner question.
I wanted to ask you before we go back there about prisoners inside the Palestinian Authority. Do you have any statistics or figures about how many really now in Palestinian Authority jails?
The confirmation that at least is being produced by very respectful organizations like Al-Haq and Al-Damir and some other Palestinian human rights organizations, they're talking about between 80 and 100. Some say it's over, like they have other numbers, but most of these Palestinians' political detainees are members of Palestinian resistance movement.
Yeah.
And that, but to go back to the week of action, there are numerous events happening this week. A series of events in support of Palestinian prisoners have been taken in Khan Yunis in Gaza, and tomorrow there is a rally in the western district of Gaza. Also in the West Bank, and Najah University is hosting a week of events in solidarity with Palestinian prisoners, and they will have, freed Palestinian prisoners to give speeches and kind of have also a seminar on how to continue and develop the movement in support of the Palestinian prisoners. Also, there are events in Brussels, in Milan, in Glasgow, and various different. Even in France, there is joint events in support of George Abdullah, the Lebanese political prisoner who's been in French jails for about 30 years almost now. And so there are joint events happening between the campaign to free Ahmad Saadat and the campaign to free George Abdullah. There are also events happening in Albuquerque, in Manchester, London. And so we feel that there is a growing movement in solidarity with Palestinian prisoners, but we are also facing a lot of difficulties and challenges, particularly that a lot of people say, well, if I'm in solidarity with Palestinian prisoners, does that mean that, this is support of terrorism? Will I be prosecuted in my country? Some people raise issues like, Palestinian prisoners, why can't Palestinian embassies, for example, play a role in this, and why they are not saying a thing about Palestinian prisoners. And it's important to notice that because, and you would know about this more than I do, that when people like Majid Abu Sharar, and Al-Hamshari and Naim Khadir used to represent Palestinians as ambassadors, it was a different era. These people were in the front line. And that's why they were assassinated. But today, the Palestinian ambassadors and the Palestinian so-called representatives are not, they don't know, and they don't want to mobilize anything around Palestinian prisoners. In fact, they try to always get, not to even get involved.
Even that woman who was representing the Palestinian in Ottawa for a tweet, she was sacked,
Yes.
So, which she apologized for, but still they sacked her because she tweeted something.
But just to be on the objective, I mean, there are some of them who are trying, like in London, for example, Ambassador Hassisian, and before. I mean, there are a few Palestinian officials who are more involved. But the point is, Palestinian prisoners needs an international solidarity, support. It needs support from various different sectors, and this support has to be based on a political support for Palestinian resistance and Palestinian liberation and rights, and it should not be based on just a kind of a humanitarian,
And we shouldn't expect this to be led by these representatives who really paid mercenaries. In general, like you said, there is some few good ones who are really kept their dignity and their pride. But could you tell us a bit about groups outside that support prisoners, like in Europe and here and internationally?
The only groups, unfortunately, that exist is less than 4 who identify themselves as groups that supports Palestinian prisoners, and that's their main objectives. However, solidarity with Palestinian prisoners is also coming from different political parties, progressive forces, human rights, forces. But the most important issue to notice here is that in Europe, for example, there is a group called U-Free, and they have been active in the last few years. In North America, there is Samih, which means steadfastness, and it's more of providing an information and media and trying to mobilize events and activities in North America. And Samidun have also put a great material, an excellent material for students and other movements who wants to mobilize for Palestinian prisoners. They can always use their resources.
Can you give the website, please, for people who are interested?
Yes, I'll give. Yes, I'll give two websites. The Samidun one is SAMIDOUN.ca. And also the campaign to free Ahmad Saadat. You can just look it up, and it's there. The website is freeahmadsaadat.org. And I think that also it's important to educate ourselves about what's happening in Israeli jails, because every Palestinian prisoner is a story by itself, and it represents an experience by itself. Yes, Palestinian prisoners have their collective, struggle and experiences, but each one actually have, a story to tell. And now Palestinian prisoners are, you can write letters to Palestinian prisoners by their name and send it, through regular mail, and it will get to them. The Israelis usually keeps the envelope and the addresses, but in many cases they do deliver these letters. So it's really important, to write letters to Palestinian political prisoners and kind of have that relationship directly.
Show solidarity with them, yeah.
Yes.
It's a way of showing solidarity. I wanted to ask you about what can people do, because, it's really important topic, but also which is really the main issue is to do support solidarity work in general. The prisoners is part of it, but what do you recommend for people to do, and where does, usually I ask this question to people, where does the BDS movement fit in this solidarity?
I think it's really important to get engaged in general, and when I say that, I mean that if someone wants to be involved in a group that supports Palestinians, fishers in Gaza, or Palestinian students, or they are actually supporting Palestinian prisoners, because these are the students who have family in prison, or these are the workers who have, relatives in prisons, or a father or a mother. And in every family, they have experienced on one point or another in their life time under occupation, someone of the family being in prison. So I think getting involved in general in Palestinian struggle and in support of Palestinian rights, it's important. Definitely BDS is what comes to mind when people want to mobilize a practical way of solidarity with Palestinians by boycotting Israeli products, by, showing that Israel is an apartheid state that practices colonialism and oppression against the Palestinian people, and therefore it should be boycotted and isolated, just like, South Africa during apartheid today it's really important that people start, coming up with taking stands with justice, taking stands, without debating, about, what is the solution for the crisis, what is the solution for the conflict. This is not our position. Our position here is to support Palestinian rights, not to propose to them what's best solution for them. To expose the occupation policies and to confront also the Canadian state position that supports occupation, racism, and colonization in Palestine. If people get involved in struggle in general, not even on Palestine, even, to support other struggles, most importantly, for example, the struggle that is happening today here in Canada, when we see indigenous native population being prosecuted and their land is being, taken away and their resources is being sucked by these companies, getting involved in struggle in Canada is support for Palestine. Getting involved in struggle against racism is a direct support for Palestine, because that's what we fight. Palestinians have a message, and this is not just a Palestinian message. It's a Palestinian message, and it's an international message.
No, I agree with you, Khaled. I think the struggle is one wherever it is, especially when it comes to settler colonialism, and the situation here is similar. And they call them like they called us terrorists.
Absolutely.
And
that's what.
And the ones really who enacted the terrorist list, I would respect this so-called terrorist list if it was enacted by the Canadian people, but the ones who enacted it, and we have documented that on Canada-Palestine Association website, the one who enacted it were the Zionist lobby here in Canada, not the representative of the Canadian people.
Yes, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we are also part of mobilizing two events, one in the Simon Fraser University and one in Kwantlen Polytechnic, and it's called Liberation Movements, scrap the so-called terrorist list. And it will be various different, liberation movements, speaking about that.
Including natives, indigenous people. Could you give us the details about that, if you have it handy?
Yes, it is. It is called Criminalizing People's Liberation Movement, and it will be taking place on Thursday, November 14th at 7 p.m. on Kwantlen Polytechnic University, and the address is 12666 72nd Avenue in Surrey, BC. And the second one, it's Friday, November 15th, and it's also at 7 p.m., room 1800 at the SFU, the Harper Center, and the address is 555 West Hastings Street in Vancouver. And
for people who didn't really catch up all this information, can they go to a website to know about these two events?
Yes, they can go to either the Samidun event, and there are also another website that I can. It's called info@redsparks.org.
That's redsparks.org. Then
yes,
info is the email, I believe.
Yes, that's the email.
They could get in touch with info at
redsparks.org.
Okay. Or is there a website for redsparks.org?
Yeah, I think it's redsparks.org.
Yeah, so they could find the details there too.
Yes.
Okay, that's great, Khaled, and it was nice really talking to you, and keep up the good work, and have a good night.
Thank you, Hanna, and you stay our voice, the voice of Palestine.
Thank you. It's your voice. It's every Palestinian voice. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And that was Hannah Kawas speaking with Khaled Barakat. And with that, we conclude another edition of The Voice of Palestine. I've been your co-host, Marian Kawas, and our final piece of music is a song by Palestinian American singer George Kurmoz entitled A Letter from Prison. The lyrics are based on a poem by the famous Palestinian poet Samih al-Qasim. We dedicate this song to all those Palestinian political prisoners and their families who have lost so much of their lives and memories to the Israeli prison system.
يؤلمني أنك تجهشين بالبكاء إذا أتى يسألكم عني إذا أتى يسألكم عني أصدقاء أماه كم يؤلمني أماه يؤلمني أنك تجهشين بالبكاء إذا أتى يسألكم عني أصدقاء يا أماه بالبكاء إذا أتى يسألكم عني أصدقاء. يا أماه كم يؤلمني، يا أماه كم يؤلمني أنك تجهشين بالبكاء إذا أتى يسألكم عني أصدقاء. يسألكم عني أصدقاء.